The Last of Us Part 2 will go down as one of the most disappointing video games of all time due to its story narrative. One of the most anticipated games of 2020, The Last of Us Part 2 came out and shocked the world of gaming and divided their fan base. Please keep in mind that this is my own opinion and how I viewed this game. Also, if you have not played The Last of Us Part 1 or 2, be warned, spoilers ahead. For those who have played the first game, we've stuck beside Joel and Ellie during joyful, painful, and exciting times. We got to grow and love both characters as they embarked on a difficult journey across America, while running into deadly infected and thugs who try to get in their way. Throughout the game, we were constantly given great dialogue between Joel and Ellie that made us have an emotional connection and love for these characters. I'm not talking about cutscenes, but gameplay. Throughout the gameplay, we heard stories that Joel tells Ellie about things he would do before the outbreak, since Ellie missed out on that. The dialogue gives us insight to their lives before the virus, and how two people who lost their loved ones grew to consider each other family. So by the end of the game, we understood the choices that were made. Joel, after trying not to get involved, became a father figure for Ellie after losing his daughter and was afraid to lose someone he loved again. This is why Joel's actions at the endgame made sense. Through Ellie, a cure was possible and the world would have been saved. But for Joel, it was too big of a price to pay. He loved her and didn't want to lose her, even if he had to kill the last hope people had. This is when we get to Part 2. Part 2 starts off with a quick recap of what happened at the end of the last game. Joel is telling Tommy what went down with the Fireflies, and Tommy promises to take that secret to his grave. After that, we get a beautiful shot of them riding back home to Jackson, where Joel meets up with Ellie. We get a sweet moment between them as Joel plays the guitar for her. After this, we cut to black and jump forward 4 years to see Ellie grown up, and we're introduced to two new characters, Jesse and Dina. But these aren't the characters I want to talk about. A cutscene interrupts our mission to clear out Ellie's and Dina's routes to make sure Jackson is clear of infected. This is when we meet Abby, the main star of this whole game. Let me get this right out of the way. Abby was a great addition to the game, and her gameplay was a highlight. In the beginning, I enjoyed playing as Abby since it was a new character addition, and I was excited to see what they would do with her. But once again, there is a cut to black and we go back to play as Ellie, only to cut to black again and play as Abby once more. The thing is, this is where the story gets interesting. Abby is running from a horde of infected and she is saved by Joel and Tommy. They all make it out alive, then we cut to black again. We see Ellie's viewpoint and find out that Joel and Tommy didn't show up at the lookout. It cuts to black and we see, if anything, one of the most controversial scenes in the game. I think you know what I'm leading up to. No! Yes, Abby kills Joel after leading both him and Tommy back to her hideout where her other members were waiting. Ellie goes to find Joel and finds Abby's hideout, only for her to get caught off guard and watch Joel's death. I know you're probably thinking, okay, we know this, what's the point of this video? After we witness Joel's gruesome death, we get a mission as Ellie on her way to get revenge on Abby. But for now, let's focus on Abby. The story plot the game gives wants us to sympathize and understand Abby. The only problem is, this is a game. And when you do it this way, it needs to be executed correctly so that gamers don't just toss their controller away every time we play as Abby, the villain who killed Joel. In order for this to be right, it needs to be executed in the way I call the Cobra Kai way. As I was playing this game, it reminded me of what the show Cobra Kai did with the Karate Kid movie. It made us sympathize with Johnny Lawrence. There was a funny theory going on around how in the original Karate Kid movie, Daniel was the bad guy and Johnny the good guy. It makes us sympathize with Johnny and understand his point of view. The show gives us one of its best scenes when Johnny is sharing his side of the story to Miguel, and his reaction is the same reaction I had.
What an asshole.
It makes sense. I understand where he is coming from and I feel for him. You can say, but that's a show, not a game. And that is exactly the point I want to make. Sometimes ideas like this are executed way better in a show or a film than in a video game. The reason is because now I have to play as the character who brutally kills, if anything, one of PlayStation's most beloved and memorable character. Why would gamers want to play as Abby after what she did? That's why there were many players less interested in their playthrough with Abby. I didn't want to play as this character. I understand that Joel unknowingly killed her father, but when he did, I knew Joel's feelings and I wanted to keep these two characters together. I understand why Abby killed Joel, but I wasn't emotionally invested enough in her story that justified Joel's death. Although Abby's playthrough became more interesting after meeting Lev, I had no reason left to care for Abby anymore because what kept coming back to my mind was she killed Joel. The reason this works better on a film or a show is because we don't have control of the characters the audience is watching. These characters progress over time. In the game, all I cared about was Ellie reaching her confrontation with Abby. I wanted her to get back at Abby for what she did, but I never got that. I understand the idea revenge is bad, but by the end, I felt empty. I love the idea of seeing the side of the villain, but as long as it's executed perfectly to the point where I'm kind of rooting for them too. But instead, I got back and forth playthroughs as Ellie and Abby that felt all over the place. I wouldn't have mind to have a whole game that was advertised as playing as Abby, going on a long journey while creating a bond with this character, with the mystery of who this character wanted revenge on. Us players would have the shock factor in the end, realizing that Joe was that person she was looking for and we were playing as the villain all along. Instead, the game gave us that shock factor very early on in the game without any character development. The game tried to make me understand her point of view, but unfortunately, it failed to capture her part of the story.